Okay, everybody. Thanks for coming to my lovely session. It's a first time session for me about web components, a front end topic. Normally, I more talk about back end stuff or server stuff or whatever stuff, but front end is completely new. My name is David. I'm from Germany, from a lovely city called Cologne. Um, yeah, it's not really lovely, but it's actually pretty awful. Never go to Cologne from an architectural perspective. Um, and I'm a long-term Joomla community member. I joined Joomla back in Mambo days, and since then I'm pretty much stayed there where I am now. I'm a member of the automated testing team, and for living in the real world, I am a freelance web developer. And yeah, I'm talking about a problem that we have right now because we pretty much fucked up the web. Modern days web is broken because we have all those fancy tools. We have front-end frameworks for JavaScript, for CSS, for whatever. Um, and in the very moment you combine two of those, it breaks. You have conflicts everywhere. Some conflicts aren't that bad. For example, combining AngularJS and jQuery works quite well, but combining, I don't know, Bootstrap 2 and Bootstrap 3 from time to time tends to cause some problems. And even worse, we lack some proper APIs. For example, if you want to include a Google map, it looks like this. You have this new and some parameters. You're working with get element by ID, which is the native JavaScript API. And when you're using jQuery, the API looks completely different. Different method names. It's just a different world. And that really can drive people crazy, right? Um, and so some people that are way smarter than me developed a vision. That's the vision of web components. And in my little example, this is what the Google map that we saw in the first slide would look like in a web components world. You have one part, which is the actual import. It's like loading this Google map plugin, and to actual display the map and pass all the attributes and parameters, you just use a simple HTML tag with attributes. And that's making life a lot easier because you don't need any new knowledge. People know how to use HTML. Add some attributes and you're done. And to make it even better, in the web components world, stuff is encapsulated. It's isolated from each other. So when our Google Map plugin uses Foundation as CSS framework to display the stuff on the map and have some fancy pop-ups, it doesn't interfere with the Bootstrap 2 of the site where this Google Map plugin is embedded. Same applies to JavaScript and also markup and all kinds of things, just isolated. And to make it even better, it's possible to nest those things. We added another plugin. In this case, it's a Lightbox plugin. And if we want to display a Google map in a Lightbox, we just nest them. That's how HTML works, right? That makes a happy developer. But I think it makes sense to explain some building blocks of how this works first. The first building blocks are custom elements. Right now, if you create a new HTML tag in an HTML document, call it foobar or something, you will be able to style it, and the browser doesn't complain about it. Just it is an empty tag, and if you put some text in there, it even displays the text. But if you only define the HTML tag in the actual markup, you have a problem when it comes to JavaScript, because you're not able to interact with this new tag in a proper way. All the APIs are missing, this kind of stuff. And so you need some JavaScript to register this new tag. In this case, it's x minus foo. And you tell it that x minus foo should be an ancestor of the default HTML element. You could also use a different object here. For example, HTML element paragraph, if you want it to be a child of a paragraph, or use an input element or whatever. One thing that is quite important is the dash in between. In the web components world, our custom tags require a dash somewhere, because that's the way of telling the browser that this is our own custom element. The next building block are HTML templates. We have a template tag up there, and if you copy and paste this block into your browser, nothing happens by default, because the stuff that's in the HTML tag, in the template tag, isn't displayed. It's hidden markup, but you can read the content of this hidden markup with JavaScript and use it. And for example, use some placeholder. And in this case, that's what I'm doing here. I'm getting the content of this template tag, and with a little loop, I will replace the number placeholder with numbers from 1 to 3. And so if you execute the stuff, it actually renders I'm paragraph number 1, 2, 3. So very convenient way of storing some markup in the DOM tree without displaying it and using it multiple times. Next building block is the shadow DOM. Actually, that's already there in browsers, and it's widely used. It's a document tree, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, within our document, and this new tree is hidden from us, so we can't see it. It's in the shadow. A very good example is the native HTML video tag. If you're using the video tag in your browser, it actually uses plain CSS and HTML to render those fancy views. All those elements, those control elements, are actually mostly div containers, just styled in a proper way. And to hide this actual implementation, for example, that the arrow looks like this arrow, is hidden from us as developers by moving it into a shadow DOM. And even more, by moving it into this shadow DOM, it doesn't interfere anymore with the CSS that we use in our main tree. So we have isolation. There are some more examples of those native elements that are using shadow DOM. Audio is one of them. Input type range is another one, and there are quite a few in modern days browsers that are using this stuff. And last but not least, we have the HTML imports. Those are quite simple. You put them in the head of your document, and you refer to another HTML document, and this document then gets included into your main document, but it isn't displayed. So it behaves some kind of like the template tag we had earlier before. It's stored somewhere in the DOM tree. It's accessible for JavaScript to read the stuff that's in there. If you, for example, if we have some CSS and JS dependencies in this HTML file that we include, this CSS and JavaScript is loaded in the background, so all resources are retrieved. The main advantage of this is that to include a plugin, a snippet, a widget, or whatever, you only require one line of code, and it's different than what we had so far, where you had to include at least one JavaScript and a CSS and a extended CSS, and I don't know, whatever, just one line. And so when we start putting those blocks together, we get web components. Web components is not one single technology, but it's built out of these building blocks. We have the template tag, which has the markup that we're using for our widget. For example, when we come back to the Google Maps example, we would have probably just an empty div container, because that's all what the Google Map API needs. So that would be in the template tag. we have the shadow DOM, because that's what we need to hide our widget from our main document, so we don't have all those problems with JavaScript conflicts and CSS overwriting each other. And last but not least, we have those custom elements to all put them in a nice and handy HTML tag. But there's a downside, which is called reality. Browser support isn't that great. For HTML template, it's okay. Of course, IE doesn't do it, but the rest doesn't look too bad. When it comes to Shadow DOM, it gets worse, because, for example, in Firefox, it's not enabled by default. IE, of course, can't do it. Safari can't do it either. On mobile, it's worse. Same for custom elements. It's all the same. So where's the cool stuff? But there's light at the end of the tunnel. And this light is a library called Polymer. And this library is built by, I think, by Google. At least there are quite a few of Google employees involved in that. And what I'm doing next is I'm showing you how to actually implement web components, how to put all those building blocks together in real world. But Google released a new version this week, so everything I tell you is already outdated. Thank you, Google. Yeah, Polymer itself consists of 3 parts. There's one bunch of libraries, the web components polyfill. That's the part that it's required to make IE work, basically, and all those other browsers. It's a whole shitload of JavaScript to make those older browsers work with all those new fancy stuff. The Polymer library itself, that's a JavaScript library that you can use to build those custom elements. You could also do this by hand, but with Polymer it's much easier. And last but not least, there's the Polymer elements, some sort of library where you can grab some ready-to-use custom elements from. Polymer, they have a bunch of example elements that you can use to build your own stuff. For example, they have all kinds of UI elements, some basic functionality. We'll see this later, and all those kinds of stuff. We can take a look at this. And with Polymer, browser support is okay so far. There are some glitches in IE10. That's why there's this crazy sign. But for normal stuff, it works quite well. So it's actually ready to use technology. But now, some live demo, the part that breaks. I prepared, oh, sorry, you need to see something, right? I prepared a little example for you, which is a website that displays the current temperature in 2 different cities, but in 3 different ways. If we take a look at the actual code of this site, it's large enough? No, better. We have the head with all the normal stuff. I use Bootstrap to make it look fancy, and also to show you that there aren't no conflicts. jQuery is used. This is the fun part. This is where we include the web components polyfill. That's required in order to make the old browsers work. And I'm importing my example elements that I will use later on. Those are in a subfolder. And so the old way of doing stuff would look like this. We would have a div class. The name of the city would be hard-coded, and you'll have an empty placeholder for the temperature to get in there, and an empty placeholder for the description to put in. And then we are using jQuery. In this case, even in no conflict mode, never do this in Joomla world, it explodes. To grab the weather data from an API, pass the city along, And if the API responds, we take the temperature and the description and put them in our both placeholder tags. That's the old way of doing it. Now comes the new fancy way, which looks like this in my example. You just have one tag, in this case local minus weather, and an attribute city. And in this attribute, I pass the name of the city where I want to retrieve the weather for. You notice the dash in between, as I mentioned, that's required for custom elements because otherwise they don't work. And if we take a look at the, remember it's important right here, elements local minus weather.html. If we take a look at this file, it looks like this. We need to import the Polymer library in order to have all those necessary requirements. This is the first call. And then we have an element to define an element. It's a Polymer element with the name of the element that we would like to define now. And we can pass along a list of attributes. I think they're comma separated in this old version. In the new version, it's definitely different. And our element pretty much consists of two parts. We have one template tag, which holds our actual markup. In this case, we are working with proper placeholders, not just empty spans. And I have some style in there to show you that it doesn't interfere with the styles of the parent document. They're completely separated from each other. And I move the jQuery code that we had in the main document over here. Yeah, and that's pretty much the same, retrieving data and applying it. And it works. It actually works really well. If I just copy this one and do New York and hit save, it's retrieving the weather for New York. And if I get in here, that's the main document, and tell it that .weather is supposed to be red. It's only changing the one in the parent document. And the ones that we import aren't affected. And either way, if we remove this one, the parent one isn't affected by the styles in our custom elements. Isolation. No more conflicts. But the way I've shown here with using jQuery isn't the Polymer way of doing stuff. The better way, that's also the reason why we have a better weather custom element down here, looks like this. Again, we have the call to load Polymer, and we're using one of those ready-to-use elements that Polymer ships. In this case, it's an element to do AJAX calls. This part here is the same. We define the name, we have the markup, and down here comes the fun part. Polymer provides us an HTML tag to do AJAX calls. Pass along the URL, the query parameters, and we tell the tag to append the response of this call to this placeholder. So we have the data up here. And there are lots and lots of those ready-to-use components in Polymer, which makes life a lot easier. And by the way, we also got rid of jQuery. That also makes the kitten happy. And yeah, Peter.
How would you implement some sort of error messaging, like if the server of the API is not available, you don't get anything back. What does your script do?
You would probably display the output, the error message within the template tag up here. So you can do all those normal if stuff. If something breaks, then display this message down here. The only thing that you can't do is that you can't bubble up in the DOM tree of the parent document and, for example, trigger an alert or change the color of something because it's isolated. So you need to do the error handling in your custom element. Yeah.
How do you track events, the phone track analytics events?
Mm-hmm.
You do better or any
It's yeah. Here comes the fun part. From the perspective of the main document, from the parent document, if I would click on my custom element, it triggers a click. And if I take a look at the event data, then it will show me that the tag local minus weather has been clicked on. What I can't do is find out on which tag within the local minus weather tag it has been clicked on. Because again, it's in the shadow DOM, it's isolated, so you can't take a look in there. Also, yeah, yes, yeah. So back to my presentation. 2 remaining slides. This is how web components work. Custom elements all run in isolation, one line of code, easy to combine stuff. Actually, it's a pretty nice stuff, but there are some downsides too. The real downside is that this JavaScript isolation doesn't really work, at least right now. Because as I said, if you do the actual import of your custom tag and you have a script tag in there, it loads this JavaScript. For example, if we have in our parent document, we have mootools, and in one of our custom tags, we use jQuery. The jQuery is retrieved from the server, and they're all executed in the same context. So we still need namespacing for JavaScript in order to avoid those conflicts. JavaScript is still a pain. But it works perfectly well for CSS, and it resolves at least some of those JavaScript conflicts when it comes to event handling and working in with global variables and this kind of things. It solves a part of it, but not the whole thing. It has quite a big of a performance impact if you think about it, because when we, for example, in our main document we include a Google Map element, and this Google Map element then has to be retrieved from the server, and after it's retrieved, we start grabbing its dependencies, and if we have those dependencies, we start to retrieve the dependencies of this document. So right now, we try to avoid multiple calls. We want to do as least requests as possible, and web components partly work the exact other way around, because it's one after another and another. And it's pretty new stuff. You won't find that much documentation right now. You will not find those much real-world examples using it. The only one that I stumbled upon was GitHub. They are using a custom HTML tag to display this file has been edited the last time 8 days ago. They have a modified minus last custom tag. That's the only real-world example that I have found. But web components start to become a real big topic. It's definitely worth watching them. It's definitely worth taking a closer look on them. And I think they can help, at least at a few places. This Google Map example is a great one, but this could be helpful. It might be helpful when it comes to all sorts of sliders and accordions and galleries and whatever, because you can nest them and those kind of things. Yeah, so take a closer look on it. That's my conclusion right now. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Um, if you create a shadow DOM yourself, and that's what Polymer does, those elements behave a bit different than the native shadow DOM elements like the video tag does. And so you can inspect them with the developer tools of your browser. Oh, you don't see it. Yeah, this way it's much more useful. For example, in Chrome, you have the shadow root, and then you can inspect all the child elements. You see which CSS is loaded and applied and what happens. So that works, but of course only for the shadow DOM elements that you use yourself. Anything else?
You said that the JavaScript installation of others almost working practice. Is this called Polymer, or is it the same?
It's because of how web components are built. When it comes to JavaScript, they all loaded in the same process, in the same thread, and so they have the possibility to conflict with each other. And that's not going to change. It's going to stay that way. So write proper JavaScript, namespace stuff. Yep. Yeah, I think so. The Polymer, those ready-to-use elements, they don't have any third-party dependencies, no conflicts. So this works quite well. This won't cause any issues. That's the way to do it. Yeah, that's quite easy. In fact, I would just have to distribute my single HTML file. Upload it somewhere, tell people to download it, put it on their local server, and add this one import statement. And of course, they would have to load the actual web components polyfill before, because otherwise IA cries. So it makes life a lot easier, hopefully. Okay, so thank you, everybody. And now go out and play with it.